Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise, but I actually do so with a heavy heart. The level of respect I have for the people involved in this bill is really off the charts. These are wonderful people. I appreciate their mental clarity, their intellect, and their big hearts, all involved in pushing this legislation in Congress. Can't attribute motive outside Congress, but in Congress, I know it's with the best of intentions and the best of heart. But when we start a federal program, things that will be only temporary, things that were going to be only temporary come to mind, like the income tax. And it was going to be small and temporary. Well, it's still going on. It's gotten bigger. And I've read the bill, and I want to thank the people involved. My good friend, I have ultimate respect for both Chairman Goodlatte and my friend Chris Smith. I just couldn't have stronger feelings for people. And my friend across the aisle, surprised some people, but we get along quite well. And I appreciate the care she has for people. But though there has been provisions added, there's been changes made to try to deal with some of concerns that people like me have had, it's still a problem. If you look at page 21, the last page of the bill, it has this language added: voluntary participation. Nothing in this act may be construed to require that a parent or guardian using a tracking device or use of a tracking device to monitor the location of a child or adult under that parent or guardian's supervision if the parent or guardian does not believe the use of such device is necessary. However, and frankly, I looked at making a provision like that and asking that it be in the bill. And then I realized, wait a minute, there's back doors. There's things the Attorney General could do that could satisfy the language we have for voluntary. Okay, no, the parent or guardian won't have to do that or monitor that. But we have the system in place. It's a federal system. So now we have the capability to monitor and track people. This person is a problem. The definition of whom could have this procedure or implement used is, as we're told, people with Alzheimer's, people with autism, people who may wander off, and the words are, a developmental disability. Well, developmental disability, that's a severe or chronic disability of an individual 5 years or older that is attributable to a mental or physical impairment or a combination of those. And so then we get over into the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, and we've seen the evolution of the DSM through 1, 2, 3, major changes at 3, 4, 5. Personality disorders like antisocial disorder were once called sociopath or psychopath. But there's an argument that they are a developmental disorder, and they are chronic for so many people. And so then you begin to see, well, we don't have a very tight definition of what a developmentally disabled person is. And we look to the bill, and of course, in trying to make this bill broader so it would include autism and other developmental disabilities, we see at page 2 in the section header, we want to make clear this isn't just Alzheimer's disease patients, so we insert the word Americans, which is a little broader than Alzheimer's disease patient. Again, that is in the header, so it's not necessarily language, and people like me that have had to review language as a judge or a chief justice and write opinions on what words mean, how they apply to these circumstances, I see where this goes. We will have a federal tracking program, but it's only for people with Alzheimer's or autism that wander off. Well, yeah, or developmental disabilities, and that is pretty far-reaching where we go with that. But it's a mental health issue and it's a physical issue. Because we know, and I know this is what's driven my friends supporting this bill, we have had people wander off and be found dead. All of us have seen stories like that. The question is it the job of the federal government to start a tracking program? And since it's mental disease, obviously the person that would be in charge of such a wonderful program, that it would help us track people with Alzheimer's, autism, or other developmental disability, it would be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. But wait, the bill gives the authority to the Attorney General of the United States. We're talking Department of Justice. The Department of Justice, and it does say a couple of places that the AG will get with the Secretary of Health and Human Services and collaborate, but ultimately these decisions are the decisions of the Attorney General. The Attorney General will make the call. The bill specifically says that the Attorney General will also basically make all the rules and regulations with regard to this tracking system. And then it also says that the Attorney General will formulate the, and I quote in quotes, best practices. So maybe to me or someone in this body, developmental disability would mean one thing, and we do have definition in federal law, but there too, it's quite broad. And I so much appreciate the insertion of the word, hyphenated word, non-invasive for the tracking device or system, but then, and non-permanent. Well, I know tattoos are non-permanent. If you go through what I understand is a pretty painful process. I had felony judge friends who would order people to have tattoos removed, so I guess you could say those were non-permanent. But when you look at definitions of what non-invasive is, and I don't find it in the bill, perhaps it's somewhere in federal law, but even then, you have the word non-invasive subject to interpretation. Whose interpretation? The Attorney General, the Department of Justice's head, to make the determination of what is non-invasive. A definition in medicine, this or some similar are often used, that non-invasive would be a process that does not violate the integrity of the mucocutaneous barriers. So, well, if you insert a chip just under above the subcutaneous barriers, would that be non-invasive? If you go a little bit under the subcutaneous barriers, would that be non-invasive? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that is once the Attorney General formulates the regulations and the best practices, then we find out what is actually non-invasive. And there is a procedure, and this indicates that people that prepared this bill, and I'm not being sarcastic, they were really trying to figure out a way to protect an over-oppressive government, you have to have a procedure of appeal. And the Attorney General will help set that up. The Attorney General will help set that up. If you have a complaint, you think something is not being done properly, well, the Attorney General is going to help create the rules that allow you to complain or appeal on that. But as we have seen over and over, oh, and by the way, I never wanted to be in a football, basketball, or baseball game, and I love all those sports and played them all. I never wanted to be in a game where the referee is the one that wrote the rules for our league, because they didn't yield. And their opinion was better than the rules on the page, no matter what the page said. But the Attorney General can tell us what he really meant or she really meant. So voluntary, I appreciate that part. But once we have a federal tracking system, and it says here in the bill, it is to prevent violence or injury or even death to oneself, to the person, or injury to someone else. Now, why would this be a concern today, other than the fact that we have seen reports come out of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, the Department of Homeland Security, who think that people deny man-made climate change are committing basically a law against nature. They're violating a law against nature. And we see now where there are people, you just put in your search engine religious beliefs, mental disorders, and you will have all kinds of investigations come up. Because there are people in this government, like those in the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, that think that those who claim to be Christians and use code words like religious liberty, that is code for Islamophobia, homophobia, xenophobia, not understanding that a true Christian is basing their beliefs and their trust in Jesus Christ, who is love incarnate. But nonetheless, we have government officials that think that religious beliefs are a problem. And that the even bigger problem is if you're a veteran. That's what Homeland Security has said. If you're a veteran and you believe in the strict interpretation of the words on the pages of the Constitution, that makes you a bigger threat. So when we're talking about terms that we have seen change over the years, we've seen the Diagnostic Statistic Manual have massive change. Why? Sometimes it's because of medicine or psychology or psychiatry has made great discoveries and improvements, and sometimes it's because one group has a better lobbying group than others. Mr. Speaker, I would humbly submit that to start, oh, and by the way, other good language in here is that none of the money can be used for conferences that may cost more than $20,000 unless they do certain things. Another provision is none of the money may be used to create a federal database, but the money will be used for state, local, nonprofit organizations. I can't find anything that says that we in the federal government cannot fund state and local databases of tracking individuals that have developmental disabilities, such as they're too religious and therefore they're deemed to have a developmental disability, antisocial personality. It's just too open, and there are too many loopholes. I like the idea. The more I thought about it, the more I read the language, the more I saw the open loopholes that could result in a federal tracking system that George Orwell would have been embarrassed about. And so, with brotherly love and appreciation for those pursuing this bill, out of the best of intentions, just wanting to stop death and harm to oneself because you have autism, Alzheimer's. Mr. Speaker, I humbly submit this is a dangerous door for any government to open, a door that Orwell would have warned about. People told me, well, gee, there's ink that you could use in a tattoo that can be tracked. I don't know. It's a door that we should not open at the federal level to begin a program of tracking, no matter whether it's state or local officials that have the database and we get looks at it or what. So I hope that the bill doesn't pass and we can work together to find ways to help those who cannot help themselves.